Okay, good morning, everybody, or good evening, good part of the day. It's October 19th, 2021, SIG Node meeting. Welcome. Today we have a reasonably short agenda. Let's go through that. And as typical, we start with what happened in past 2 weeks. We skipped last week because of KubeCon. I think, I hope everybody enjoyed KubeCon week and had a chance to listen for some presentations, or at least like watch for Slack being so active. We a little bit down in PRs, so we like burning through the backlog, but we still very high number of PRs still here. So yeah, I looked through the PRs and nothing was closed out that is not ordinary, so everything is expected. Nothing we lost or didn't. Nothing that needs to be reverted back and like reopened. Nothing rotten away. So yeah, this is what happened in past 2 weeks in PRs. And now let's go to first item on agenda. Marga, I'm not sure. Oh,
yes, that's me.
Transition. Marga,
yes.
Hi Marga.
Hi.
Yep.
All right. So yeah, so I wanted to start a CAP, and the template said that I should make sure that the corresponding SIG agrees before I do a lot of work. So I linked here a draft with like it's a very drafty draft. So there, I didn't spend a lot of time there, but I wanted to see if this was something that people would support. So the point of this CAP is to expose their OCI runtime hooks. So the OCI already defines a bunch of runtime hooks that are useful to know when the container started, when like the different stages of the container have started, and the same thing when it stops. And right now, those are not exposed in any way. So the container runtimes have these hooks. So containerd and cryo have the hooks. Other runtimes like kata container or gvisor have only a subset of the hooks, not all of them, but some. But they are not exposed in any way to Kubernetes. So for people running workloads on Kubernetes, they cannot make use of these hooks. So the proposal would be to add a way to, like we need to do the whole wiring of these hooks up the stack. So make them available through the CRI API, and then make the kubelet use the CRI API, and then also like specify where in the pod spec all of this goes. So like it's a lot of wiring to make this happen. I don't think it's too hard, but they are quite a bunch of moving parts. So we need to be in agreement that we want to make this happen.
I believe this is Don, and I believe the cryo already support the OCI hooks, right? So
right,
not
yeah,
the CRI level.
Right. Yes.
So I think the container runtimes support these hooks, but there's no way to specify them for a container in Kubernetes.
Correct.
Yes.
That is the point. Yes.
So do we have consent? Because this topic came talk to us 1.5 years ago, or maybe even earlier, that one. So I think that some community members raised some concern. I was looking forward. I think that this came from the Teamwork, and I think the maybe that's the same company, right? So I looking forward if one of you from the company and come back to continue this conversation. If I remember correctly, mostly is missing. It is in the Kubernetes, no matter it is the containerd or cryo, they are using those hooks. But the problem it is they have the hard time to mapping of the container C group ID to the Kubernetes labels, Kubernetes pod concept, all those kind of things. That's the hard mapping, right? So that's, otherwise we don't need the CI level representative, right?
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't follow that part, but so yes, so wait, just a second. So before you ask about Kinfolk, yes, so I'm currently at Microsoft because Microsoft acquired Kinfolk, but I'm in the same team that brought this from Kinfolk 2 years ago. And yes, this is something that we would like to have in order to intercept when containers get created, but it's not just us. So we've seen a lot of different use cases out there of different things that people want to run when containers get created that would really benefit from having these hooks. Right now, there's a bunch of different strategies that people can take to get the same behavior, but the hooks are already there in the OCI spec, and we have workarounds, but they are hacky and ugly, and this would allow us to get rid of the workarounds and instead have an elegant way of exposing this up the stack.
Right. So I think this is a very interesting topic area. There has been a new API effort called NRI to take a look at in this context. There's also some built-ins that we've been adding to the container runtimes to allow configuration of things like our limits. But there's a lot of stuff that you can do with these hooks, and some doesn't really map, like what Don was saying. Some don't really map to how would it work for one pod versus another, right? How would you make that switch? But yeah, I think there's definitely a lot of interest in this at the container runtime level as well, and we'd like to have some conversations on it. Maybe the NRI model is going to be a good API for us to implement.
Yep.
I'm not really sure. We're going to need more work here.
So I think also to add one more thing, I have a long history with the hooks. Proposed them originally in Runc, and we've added them in Cryo. So one thing that came out over the years is the example of the NVIDIA hook, right? So that was too complicated to write. So there was an effort started some time ago called CDI, to look into how we can simplify the hooks. So with CDI, we have declarative way to modify the runtime specification. So the hook doesn't have to go and make those changes because the runtime is already capable of making a lot of those changes. And then the hook becomes much simpler, like running LD config or something like that. So that's the path for GPU enablement type of hooks. But I do agree that there is no easy way to run hooks that are capturing seccomp calls or tracing and so on. So I'm not sure whether it should be a part of a generic hook or maybe something specialized, like a call to trace this container, and then it goes and installs the hook underneath the covers for you.
Yeah, if I remember correctly, please correct me if Nanta is here. I think that we talk about this, we all generally feel those a lot of use cases, like the like NVIDIA GPU support, a lot of use cases we think about those hook is useful. But the concern raised, it is how, because we also realize the hook is very, very powerful. Those hook also, some of the hook implementation, could be like the harm of the entire host. So then there's the expose of the security concern and the safety concern, all those kind of things. So this is why we raised in the past, then we want to continue discussing. So, but I think this is what we raised 2 years ago, but we want to continue discussing. I think like all the other effort to make the more declarative and what kind of hook you want to install and more regulate, that's kind of that we try to push it forward. So anyway, I just want to share some background context here. And
yeah, thanks, Don.
Yeah, there are hook we want there's
Yeah, and yeah, this is not. Oh, sorry.
Oh, hey, Lanta.
Yeah,
I
this
was
is
going to say there's a lot of good contact, good text being added to this topic, and Brian makes a good point, right? So,
Yeah,
sorry, yeah, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. I remember that the hook is very powerful and it can just run anything on the host, right? So it has access to the host and also the container environment. And then because of that, I do have a concern that because it can access host and it can, as Don mentioned, can modify host and also may make assumption on the host environment. Then if we expose that in the Kubernetes API or in CRI, it may make the pod. I mean, it depends on how we define the API, but it make the pod, non-portable, right? Because if your hook depend on something on host, then it means that this pod has to run on host with that software or those dependencies. So, and those dependencies are not built into the container image. If I understand correctly, that's possible. So that's something we may want to avoid because you basically are writing a pod directly depend on something on host and not containerized, not packaged in the image.
Yeah, and I think that's what Murnau was talking about with the CDI. This makes a lot more sense when these are predetermined dependencies for a pod, for certain use cases. But if we were to expose it in a very general way, yeah, that could be very risky. So we want to be careful here, right?
Yeah, that's the reason in the past we raised this concern, and actually this is even 2 years ago. It's not the first time to talk about this way. When we first started those hooks, I believe many people, because we want more powerful, more flexibility. But on the other hand, in the SIG Node, we have to consider about the general use cases, maybe for the security and for safety and for the host safetyness, right? So that's why we are being discussing so many times. This is for the if I remember correctly, again, I want to ask Mike, if I remember correctly, for the Kinko's use cases, and 2 years ago, most it is for the tracing. And maybe right now it's different, but right now, before that, the most important things, it is they are missing about the Kubernetes labels and the pod information, related information, passing to for those. But the rest of the stuff, actually, we could. So this is why I think about well-defined use cases, we can help. But do we need to go through the like powerful hooks, immediately enable that at the CRI level? We can discuss. So that's the we've been always paused there. We could understand your use case and support your use cases in a proper way and make sure it's not like you, if I remember correctly, because there's the many cases came to us, want to using power hook, but at the same time, because they said, oh, why they want the CRI level? It is mostly just for label.
Right. Yeah. So for our main use case, yes, you're right. It is for tracing, and yes, the applying the labels is the main thing. What we want to do is be able to detect a container as soon as it starts, like right from the beginning. And right now we are using some interception with FA notify, and it works, but it's kind of hacky. That's why we would want to have something that is not a workaround.
The hotel tracing might be what you guys need for that particular use case.
Right, but there are other use cases that we are also interested in for security, like, for example, being able to intercept a container before it starts if the image is not like approved to run for in whatever like whitelist of images that are approved.
Yeah, I think something like that would be a good policy to add to the runtime handler architecture we currently have.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Install the hooks, because who is install that hooks? Anyone can install that hooks, which is totally against the security perspective, right?
Yeah.
that's
The other thing I would add, if there's a concern about wanting to be able to detect the containers faster as opposed to after like a full sync loop or something like that, there was that proposal about optimizing the plague in order to take that time down significantly.
Okay.
Yep.
I'm not sure what that means, but okay, I can look into that. Yeah, the other thing we were discussing was that some metadata, or not metadata, some underlying implementation details are exposed, but others are not. Like in particular, the one that we don't have access to directly is the process ID of the container, which is the data that we would like to have. But other things are exposed, and yeah, but this would be like a different cap, like exposing the container process ID. I don't know, maybe it's something that we could explore if you think the hook proposal makes no sense.
Megan, the last scenario, so you want container info, the container PID, that information, so that's cannot from the CLI, right? So that's more from the container runtime. You can retrieve that PID. So you want to
like a generic way, because each container runtime is different. So right now we need to get the PID in one way if it's containerd, and in a different way if it's CRI-O, and yeah, if you're using whatever other container runtime.
I think in the verbose mode we were already returning that, if I remember correctly. I'll have to check. But the problem with that is like what you return for a VM, right? Like a VM based runtime will have different characteristics. And in case of CRI-O, for example, we are not starting the POS container by default anymore. So for the pod, there is no PID. So so PID is kind of not always guaranteed to be present.
Right.
All right.
So you want two things. One it is the Kubernetes pod level of the label, or even like a host label, right? In your
okay, so for our project, what we want is to be able to trace containers as soon as they start. But as I was saying, there are other projects that we are also involved with that want to be able to like deny executing a container based on the image. And all of this is about being able to like intervene right when a container is starting. This is what the hooks are for.
I think what may be useful looking at this cap is to expand this motivation section into actual use cases rather than generically say that hooks are useful. Maybe that will help to understand which scenarios we want to address, and maybe address some of the scenarios differently, or like declaratively some way.
Okay.
I mean, it will help for sure. Yeah.
So it seems like admission control, like maybe what you're looking at is not wanting it at the Kube API perspective, but maybe at the node level. I think that there was a cap in the past for looking at like node level admission controller, where you would
somebody
do
from
something.
AWS presented it recently.
Yeah.
I think there was also another one that floated around at some point that would be, kind of useful for a lot of different use cases.
So yeah, I agree with you. This is why I keep asking. I want to summarize what's your. I think to support all your use cases, there's several things you ask for, right? So one, it is you want to understand the labels, right? So I think the pod label we've been talk about in the past in the SIG Node, I think that's reasonable through the CLI to parsing. But the host label, maybe we need to argue because there maybe have too much information and it's out of control. So that's the separate thing, and also have the security concern, potential security concern. So we should discuss if you need it. But to like the interject of the execution to look at the image and it is signed and this person can. I personally think that's kind of the wrong way to using, and that's the security concern there. We need to discuss with the SIG-auth, is that the right model? I think that's, at least I think about it wrong, maybe I'm wrong. And the SIG-auth have the more power to answer this question. And the last one, it is you want to get that the ID, we can discuss, because right now it is true, is undefined, like the menu give you use cases, like the VM, right? So the certain use cases, we just don't know which one should be exposed. If we could agree upon that one, I think that's reasonable. We could add that one in the CRI level and as the status. And so it's just split into different cases. If you just simply say, oh, I want the OCI hook, there's a huge concern for us for the safe of the, not just for security, right? So we've been discussed this many times, and also because new cases like the Alila just raised we found some bug for the PLEG, and actually from the move us convince to some extent convince us to move toward a different way. So which is actually we've been raised the same concern. It's just recently the refactory actually validated our concern. So I just want to share here, yeah. So we could break this more complicated problem into the small pieces, maybe help you move forward, reduce some overhead in your implementation, yeah.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. And I would add, like one of my concerns is, at least as this KEP is currently written, this is a very large scope change. I don't think that it's it may seem small, but I don't see it as that small. And having been one of the folks who's been very arms deep in the kubelet recently, I really think that we would need significantly more resources in order to be able to I don't think this can just be sort of a drive-by thing where you do the 1 or 2 PRs and it's done. We would have to have people actively involved in kubelet maintenance in order to be successful.
Yeah, I think Elena, it's important to recognize that the integration with Kubernetes is going to be the more difficult part of this for generic circumstances. But the container runtimes, both currently, or all of them can currently support these hooks. It's just they don't have a common way to configure them. The cryo team has a good set of code for a way to configure them, and the container D team has put together this NRI proposal, which is and that's being refactored as we speak. So I would say it's an alpha kind of work in progress effort, and that would be another way that we can configure these hooks in a generic way at the container runtime level. But how we expose that to Kubernetes is still also a work in progress. And I agree with you. There's a couple of groups. There's the COD group that's working on this and has produced the CDI already. But again, that's at a different level. It has not been exposed directly except through certain annotation kind of models, to the Kubernetes API.
And key point is what most probably it shouldn't be exposed to the end user. So it's a back-end thing how to implement the complex things, and users should not know about those.
There's also the big thing right now of every time we touch that part of the kubelet, we end up breaking things in unexpected ways because we don't have the test coverage to actually make big changes. We probably have 6 months of testability work with the, small handful of people who are full-time on kubelet before making any change like this is even considerable. We're in a bad place we need to dig ourselves out of before we start considering making broad sweeping API changes.
I agree with you, but I just want to say that the OCI hook it's been discussed more than 5 years. We feel initially, I think people maybe disagree with us, but we pushed. The reason we didn't really solve that problem, it is we do think about the security concern. I believe right now Kubernetes community, everyone agree with us. We always want to through different way to solve customer use cases. Like like the NVIDIA also can talk to this one, like must lead it. But I understand that so far I understand actually they move forward and they don't really need the OCI hook we fully support, but initially it's just must required. So we can help you break your current problem into the pieces, help you solve the problem to some extent, but the OCI hook is really concern for us how to expose at the CRI level and also even goes to maybe because the initial proposal even goes to the pod level. So that's big concern for us. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. On the NVIDIA point, like they solved it having a RunC wrapper. And this is the kind of thing that I say that it's not a nice workaround, and I would like us to find a better solution, right? And not have like each one implements their own ugly workaround. But I understand everything you're saying, and I will take it back to my team and see if we can think of something better, more better scoped, or how we can move forward with that.
Yeah, Mark, just give myself and Murnell a call or chat. We can tell you, we can hook you up with the, and then also, of course, Alexander and everybody else that's commented here would be a great, link for you to get in touch with the status of where these APIs are.
I would actually suggest to welcome and join the code working group meetings. We have it on Tuesdays, once in 2 weeks. And that's exactly the point where we're discussing different use cases for NRI and CDI. And your input will be very, very valuable.
Yeah, CDI maybe is the right, that working group maybe is the right form for discussing continue. And hopefully never know. And once we finalize and come back to SIG Node and to share those things. Yeah.
All right. Thanks.
Thanks.
Okay, next item on agenda is Marcus, cross-based resources in CRI camp.
Yes.
Marcus.
Hello, folks. Yes, this is another API change draft KEP that I've been working on for the past few weeks, few months, and now in a KEP form. So this would be about bringing class-based resources into CRI protocol. A little bit of background in this is that probably the initial motivator was Intel RDT technology, which is basically QoS. QoS technology for memory bandwidth and cache. And it's like inherently a class-based, so you have a finite limited amount of classes that you can configure through kernel interfaces, and then you can assign bits to these classes. And we thought, and then this is also, RDT is already also supported in OCR runtime spec, so we thought about ways how to support this also in container runtimes and then in Kubernetes. And RDT is, as I said, like inherently like class-based sort of resource. Then block IO was a logical kind of next step in this direction as well. It's like the block IO controls are also supported in OCI runtime spec, but they are like very hardware specific and like hard for user to use as is. So we came up with this kind of class-based approach for that as well. So the motivation was initially to make Intel RDT supported in Kubernetes, and then with that came also the idea of block IO controls. The goals here would be, of course, support the strategy and block IO, but also make this like more generic support for possible future extensions of similar kind of class-based resources. I don't know if the class-based is or class resources is the best name. Maybe it could be like container QoS resources or something. But this is class-based is now what I used in this KEP draft. So the proposal itself would be in this KEP to enable this class-based resources in Sierra protocol. So basically, we have a two-step approach here. So first, enable this in Sierra protocol, and follow the pattern that, for example, seccomp filters was using. So have it in Sierra protocol, and then enable first through pod annotations, and then in the second next step, the goal would be to make it really a first-class citizen in Kubernetes with pod spec extensions. But this step is basically just about the Sierra protocol. So the proposal would be to add notion of this class-based resources in Sierra protocol, and then enable pod annotation parsing in a kubelet to assign then containers into the classes. There are some user stories listed here. So the Sierra protocol changes are pretty small and backwards compatible in this proposal. So we added like a new message in Linux container config, Linux container class resources. And it would be basically just a map.
Just a quick question, because it looks like this is going the route of pod annotations. Pod annotations can't really be versioned like an API, and that can cause a lot of problems for like version skew in Kubernetes. Do you have a plan to deal with that?
Yes, the plan is actually to migrate it to like first-class citizen and fields in the pod spec. But
if that's the case,
time.
then it should not start as pod annotations. It should start right off the bat as alpha fields in the pod spec.
We're doing the same for host process, Windows host process. We started with pod annotations, and now it's moving to.
Yeah, I from my understanding from doing API reviews recently, going from annotations to annotations are great for proof of concept, but trying to go from annotations in a KEP as like an officially supported thing in the Kubernetes code base, and then trying to make those API like officially supported constructs, that is very difficult.
And for the
he was just looking at the CRY API in this case, as far as I can tell from this code.
Yeah, I was going to say for the host process containers, for the alpha implementation, we put in the CRI API changes and the annotations because there was a delay for when the CRI API updates would get vendored into the different container runtimes. So we did have a plan to, support the CRI fields right away.
Yeah, that was.
I just want to support Alila because I had in the past the experience to graduate init container from annotation to the field, and during the alpha beta, both Eric Tong and myself and did really, it's really tough job for us. Basically, it's just tedious, but really easy to bring the issues. Yeah. So
this is just based on a conversation I had with Jordan Liggett.
Mhm.
I'm currently doing API review shadowing for Node. So this is something that I would bring up as an API reviewer. So I wanted to flag that early.
We try to hard right now.
Yeah, that's actually I listed that as a kind of alternative approach in the end as well. So it is possible to. Oh, well, I have thought about that. Okay, we can do it like in lockstep, the CRI protocol and podspec as well. The reason basically why I put this pod annotations would be that it would like be easier and less friction to first put it in or add it in CRI protocol and then think about the podspec enhancements. But I'm totally open to adding it in podspec as well if like SIG Node, and we can agree on that like format. And if people think that's a good way to proceed, so review everything in lockstep. I'm fine with that as well. I don't have any problem with that. I just put it different, well, in two steps to make it kind of easier to adapt. But this is still an early draft version, so I really would like to get feedback on this. Of course, the naming is one thing, but then there is also in this draft cap, it's only about Linux container config at the moment. Recently, we started to think that probably this could be something or should be something that is like OS agnostic, so it could be like in the container config level, so automatically kind of Linux and Windows would be supported. I don't have much experience in Windows containers, Windows nodes myself, so that's basically why I added to Linux container config, but probably
So Max,
it's something. Yeah.
Max, you list several use cases could be used. So sorry, I haven't looked at your cap yet. So
yeah.
One thing is obviously you have the two use cases. I think it is really important use cases, and we do see the problem. We don't see support. One, it is not accountable resource, right? So we do see that we know that years. So there's the certain resource using, especially for memory and even container runtime, and it is being killed and reclaimed resource. But there are certain resource is not chargeable, have to charge to the host. So looks like your proposal try to address that problem. So then we can better account, better monitoring. And so then as the result, we even could be, maybe, I'm not sure at this moment, better scheduling. And the reason I say that not sure is because today scheduler don't have the usage a while scheduler. So that's why I'm not sure how help on that one, but at least on the node side, admission will be do better job because we do know our situation. Then you mentioned like the block IO. Of course, we don't support block IO very well, and even network IO. And I didn't really map to how this can solve that problem. But I just want to, do you have like a clear of the use cases, how you're going to using this proposal to config? Like for the orderly, you also mentioned Windows. I'm not sure Windows at all because they mentioned here even just touch base 1.9, if I remember, I saw just quickly scan. But I hope we have the more clear cases, like how you are going to solve this block IO and or maybe network IO, because it's kind similar policy, how you plan to address this problem through this proposal. So can you update the cap for those kind of things so we can have more clear understanding? Because at least I don't know how those two cases, like the two cases, both cases I do know it is, I mean, like not accountable resource, and how to talk to the block IO, how the same proposal can handle both cases here.
Yeah, so the kind of main idea here would be that those classes would be kind of opaque to kubelet. So all the configuration of the classes and what would be available would be handled and taken care by, well, the system administrator or the container runtimes. So basically, kubelet or Kubernetes would not need to know anything about the details how, for example, these block IO classes would be configured.
You're optimizing what's on the node as opposed to pushing it up so that Kubernetes can optimize across.
Yes, and also because these are like very hardware or system specific settings can be, so number of RDT classes available and or the block devices that exist on nodes, especially on like heterogeneous clusters. So I
think even in situations where you would want a node to be optimizing itself, for the resources that are currently on it, I think it's also going to be useful to tell our emission controller and schedulers, right, that's happening on that node, so they could take advantage of the changes that are happening in the resources that are being reported in the stats going up to understand, why did that pod all of a sudden have more resources? Right? We're probably going to need a little bit better integration between what's happening on the node and what's happening at the cluster management side of the fence.
I had one other question I kind of wanted to bring, specifically around the block IO proposal there. What's kind of the difference between, or maybe a question, what's the difference between using Intel RDT for block IO control versus like SIG v2 has a lot of IO enhancements, right? Like IO latency and IO, different types of IO controls. So what's kind of the implication? Because there's been some folks who are thinking about using SIG v2 for that. So just trying to understand what's the difference between your kind of proposal for SIG.
I mean, this block IO and RDT would be like two different resource types or different class resources here. So RDT is just about memory bandwidth and cache allocation. Block IO is like a totally kind of orthogonal class or QoS control in here as a separate resource, and it uses C groups block IO control directly.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So the sysadmin would configure, for example, these classes that this go, I don't know, guaranteed burstable best effort or gold, silver, bronze, whatever, and say that bronze throttle all block devices to like 10 megabytes per second. I don't know, or whatever specific controls, even very detailed controls, or then just of course, like high level, like overall weight is also possible to set there.
I see. Makes sense. Yeah. I mean, I think just as part of this proposal, we should probably consider, if in the future, and I guess we will, I think in the future, as we move toward SIG v2, we'll probably want to take advantage of those IO controls in Kubernetes, in kubelet. So we'll want to make sure this kind of works well with that. Just something to consider, I think, longer term.
Yeah. And about the runtime support, OCI runtime spec has support for RDT and block IO controls, and RunC supports those. And Cryo, we submitted PRs that were merged like some month or two ago. So basically, RDT and block IO controls are supported in CRI-O at the moment. But the annotation, well, it's made available for users via pod annotations, but they are parsed in CRI-O at the moment. So in the container runtime side, which is not optimal, but it's a kind of way to make it available for early adopters, so to say. And we have PRs open for container DS as well at the moment. But in order to make it kind of more first-class citizen in Kubernetes, definitely would need to have support in the CRI protocol and pod spec, of course, as well.
Okay, I think most of us haven't read your CAP. Thanks for this one, so we can follow up. Is that okay?
I can note
sure. Yeah.
And
yeah,
also
sure.
somebody posted this link as well. So if you will attach this link to the CAP as well, if it's informational, it may be helpful for reviewers.
Yeah. I guess that's
And also Manu and David both are driving up the SIG version 2 and working. And so maybe can also review this CAP and provide more.
Hey, I had one more question. So any tips or suggestions? What would be the best way to discuss this? Would it be like kept directly, or should I open a like email thread or Slack thread, or any thoughts on that?
Probably in the CAP itself, and if you,
that's
or
what
you can open a Slack thread if you want something more. But I think we are all distributed around the world, so.
Yeah. But thanks very much for the feedback, and I'll update the CAP and try to make it or make the wording a little bit clearer what this is all about. So to answer that.
Okay, thank you, Marcus. Eric,
Yeah.
do you want to talk about your item? Eric?
Eric just need the call out to review attention. That's all.
Okay. Yeah, I think it was also mentioned on Slack. Okay, so another CAP to review. And then I want to share this link with everybody. We want to remove Docker shim in 124, and time is running very fast. So please, if you can distribute this form among end users, like whoever using Kubernetes, and like maybe they can give us feedback on how prepared they are. I think it's very important from community standpoint to make sure that Kubernetes is still seen as a good platform, and like it's very unfortunate to break customers and unexpectedly. So I think double use of this forum is first to bring awareness that this is happening, and second is collect information. So both are very important. So yeah, please distribute. And I also wanted to bring up this one. I saw this been merged on the probe termination on Graceful Shutdown. We terminated probes, and I see another PR that doing the same on other things. And I wanted to discuss, like we discussed before in one of the PRs, that we don't want to terminate readiness probes. We want to keep running them. Even if they fail, they will just make the pod unready, and maybe like some traffic will stop flowing to that. So I was wondering if there is any considerations here. I think Mrunal, you've been reviewing this PR.
So Ryan, are you on the call?
Yeah, I am.
Yeah, can you talk through the issues you ran into?
So yeah, we were testing graceful shutdowns recently, and we ran into an issue with readiness probes and liveness probes specifically on the graceful shutdown aspect of the kubelet. We saw that the liveness probes were still being run on the shutdown, which could lead to the pod being terminated ungracefully in that situation. And so this PR terminates those probes on shutdown, and so we shouldn't see that issue anymore. I didn't actually see this comment yet. Did I answer
Yeah, I
that
just
question?
posted it.
Or-
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think we've been solving the same problem in this PR that was mentioned here, and there is a follow-up for that we actually solved the problem. On pod deletion, we also didn't stop liveness probes, and it led to some unexpected behaviors when graceful termination wasn't executed as well. So I think it's the same here. My only concern here is that if you stop running readiness probes, the pod may still be marked as ready, and it may lead to other unexpected consequences. So maybe just we can discuss it in this PR, or we can. I just wanted to bring attention to that.
Yeah, I agree with the graceful shutdown. The rating, we had a discussion with David Porter, I believe, and we may need to do something specifically for the readiness probes to take it out of the readiness status. I agree. We can discuss it here or at a different meeting as well.
Okay, thank you. I think we can discuss it on offline. I just wanted to make sure that we this comment is not lost. Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah, thanks for bringing it up, Sergey. Yeah, I think we'll probably need to handle readiness probes differently than other types of probes there. So that's probably the consideration we need to take. Yeah.
So any other topics? I think one big topic for next week will be reviewing the caps, because we had a soft deadline, and we need to understand what caps scheduled for 123 already have a PRs out, and if they don't, we need to understand whether we want to continue with these caps or postpone them to next release. So if you have any caps that you're running for 123, please come to the next meeting to discuss it. Any other topics? We have 4 minutes left.
Sergey, on the deprecation of the shim, was there an expectation on who's going to handle, the reconfiguration of running, Kubernetes, make sure it gets back up to reconfigure it, or are we just going to pop an error message, or, you've got to define your new external, runtime?
Yeah, as of now, the recommendation is to drain a node or restart it with new runtime, whatever your hosting environment is. So there is no automatic reconfiguration.
Drain, reconfigure, and then restart that node. Okay.
Yeah. So this is a recommended way as of now. There is no automatic transition or anything like that.
Okay.
And I think the biggest issue is that all the dependencies on Docker are somehow hidden. It's very, typically dependencies are not coming from pods or applications themselves, but from monitoring aspect of it, or some security aspect of it, and maybe some even registry configurations that suddenly will not be applied. So we don't automatically transition or transfer any of that because it may not be desirable for customers. So yeah.
That makes sense. Even if you were going to an external cry Docker shim, you still wouldn't be using some of those internals. So, okay. Yeah, that makes sense. So quiesce, reconfigure, and hopefully the clouds will handle it. but I expect, like Minikube probably going to have a way to, just rerun. It seems like it would be nice if we had, some kind of documentation somewhere that explain this, this process for at least, a dozen or half a dozen, of the most widely used Kubernetes environments.
Yeah, we have an action item on that. We've been discussing what to document, and I think the only documentation we wanted is self-hosted Kubernetes. But you bring in a good point. Maybe in Kubernetes IO website, we can link to other clouds and some ways to configure stuff. We're actually doing it for security and monitoring agents. There is a link from our documentation to what security and monitoring agent supportability status for different runtimes. And big concern right now that we highlighted is these agents are moving very slowly to support other runtimes. I don't want to name any names, but there are many tools that customers can configure for Docker shim, and unfortunately, they're not super excited to do work to switch to the runtimes.
Yeah, understood. I had looked at those about 4 years ago, and I was just hoping it went away. Okay, thanks.
Still here. Yeah, and situation is even worse for Windows, but it's not that. I mean, yeah, we still need to. We still have a desire to deprecate Docker shell and remove it. We just need to make sure that we don't break customers too in a very big way. Okay, any other questions? We are at time. Thank you everybody for attending. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Sergey.